Hi everyone, it's great to be with you all again this morning. And today I'm going to be talking about the subject giving. And I've come for the first time and done the recording for this week's message in my family home in Dickleborough. This house where I'm standing right now is the place where I grew up. I spent all of my childhood here and all of my teen years until I left home and got married. And this place is a place where I have been given so much. When I look back, I've got nothing really but happy memories of my family home. It's here where I've been given so much time. I've been given so much love and care. This is the place where I have received. And there's something, isn't there, about giving that enhances our lives. Have you ever been on the end of somebody giving you something? Maybe finance or a present or time, or they've done something for you and they've invested into your life. They've given into you and you have become richer and a better person for it. There is an amazing verse in the Bible that talks about lavish generosity and giving. And I want to read that verse or use that verse as my starting point for my preach today. And here is the verse, and it's very, very well known. It says this: "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son." John 3:16. I think if we're going to talk about giving, that is about the best verse that we could start with. That God so loved us that he gave his one and only Son. In other words, God gave us everything. And so when it comes to extravagant giving, this verse really sums it up. God was so generous, he gave everything that he had. Today, I really want to talk about why putting God first with our giving should be the hallmark of every follower of Christ. That every single one of us who is a follower and a believer in Jesus, we should put God first with our giving. For all of us, it's not how much we have that matters, but it's recognizing that what we have doesn't belong to us, that everything we have belongs to God. And because of this, we are called to be stewards of everything that God has given us. I could ask us a couple of questions today, and I guess for most people watching here this morning online, you probably are a Christian. And if I ask these two questions, I would say yes to both. And here are the two questions. Do I believe that tithing my money is a good practice for Christians? Yes, I do. Do I think giving to your local church is important? Yes, I do. But I wouldn't hang my message on those two things. I wouldn't actually say you have to give 10% of your income to God. And neither would I actually say you have to give all your giving to the local church in which you attend. What I would say is this: that a generous heart will always produce a life of giving. A generous heart will always produce a life of giving. In other words, what we have is all God's. And when we get that attitude right, and when we get that principle right in our lives, everything else, I believe, will fall into place when it comes to giving. Let me give you an illustration. When Michelle and I were courting, when we were dating and we were thinking about getting married, we had some very important discussions leading up to our wedding day. Number one, where were we going to live? I lived in Norfolk, Michelle lived in Essex, so we had to have a discussion about where we were going to live, either in one of those places or somewhere else. We had to have that discussion as we entered into married life. Did we want to have children? I think it was pretty important that if one of us didn't and the other one did, we needed to have that discussion. So that was one of the discussions that we had. But here is another discussion that we had that I think in some ways is as equally important as the other two things that I've mentioned, and that's this. Do we believe that we want to give out of all that we have to God? Do we believe that giving of our finances and giving of ourselves is really important? And we came to the decision that actually giving was going to be a fundamental, foundational thing in our lives, that we would seek to give all that we were and all that we have over to God. In fact, one of my life verses when it comes to giving is found in Psalm 24 verse 1. It's not one of those usual Bible verses that you would go to when it talks about giving, but this is a verse that's always been a huge challenge to me, and it's this verse. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. I've always found that verse really challenging. That actually everything in this world and everything in it, the earth and everything in it, all belongs to God. Well, I live in this world, I'm a follower of Jesus, and I have to say, and I have to believe that everything I have is God's. In some ways, do you know what? You can never afford to give because there will always be something that will take your money. We're living, aren't we, at this time in a very expensive time in our lives. Everything seems to be going up at a fast rate. Fuel bills, the fuel that we put in our car, how we heat our house, food costs, everything seems to be going up at a rapid pace. And there will always be something that will take the place of giving to God. And so I think giving actually comes down to an attitude of our heart. Jesus focuses a lot on attitude. He focuses a lot on attitude towards possessions and what we do with what has been entrusted to us. In fact, Jesus says some very, very challenging things in the Gospels. He says words like this in Luke 14:33. So then, none of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions. Wow, that's challenging. Matthew 19:21 says this. Jesus said to him, talking to a rich ruler, if you wish to be complete, go and sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and then come and follow me. In Acts 2 verse 45, it says that they began to sell their property and their possessions and were sharing them all with anyone that had need. Wow, do you know what? Giving is costly, isn't it? Giving our all to God is costly, but it is so important. Did you know that in the 38 parables that Jesus told, in 16 of them, he talks about money and possessions? Maybe Jesus had a point to make because he knows how much giving is a challenge to us. Did you know that over 2,000 verses are found in the Bible that specifically relate to money and possessions, compared to only 500 that specifically relate to prayer? And we would say prayer is absolutely vital. And so I want to encourage us today, when it comes to giving of our finances, put God first. Matthew 6:33 says this, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. This verse is an easy verse to quote, and one many of us know really well. But how do we seek first God's kingdom? I actually think theoretically it's a pretty easy answer. We put God first with everything. Everything we have, everything that we do, everything that we say, and everything we think. We seek first God's kingdom in every aspect of our lives. That's the theory, but it's not always so easy to do. To seek God's kingdom first must include our time. It must include our language, the way we speak. It absolutely must include our attitude, our thought life. It must include our actions, but of course it must include our money. How we spend our money, how we handle our money, speaks volumes about our priorities. I don't know what your background is on things like tithing. This is my background. I was taught and I grew up with a teaching that says you should give the first 10% of your income to God. Now, that's not particularly wrong in any way, shape or form. I think that's not a bad practice. But this is my feeling on tithing now, that everything I have is God's. And so Michelle and I practice tithing as a first part of our giving, but we seek to give so much more away. And so I think the one thing that I want to leave us with today, if you don't remember or take away anything else from this message today, I want to make sure that we take this away. And this is what it is, and this is it, and it's going to come up on our screen right now. Put God first with your finances. Put God first with your finances. Make what you give the number one priority in your expenditure. Put your giving at the top of your Excel spreadsheet when you're budgeting your finances. Because I want to say to us that if we try and put everything else first, we will probably end up giving God nothing because life is expensive, or we will just give him the dregs of what we have. And Jesus doesn't want us to give him the dregs. He wants us to seek his kingdom first. He wants us to be lavish with our giving and our generosity in all ways, actually. I've discovered something, right? Everything that is given to God is never lost. The Bible tells us that if we sow, we will reap. If we give, the Bible says it will be given back to us, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. We can never, ever outgive God. It's impossible. My father-in-law, Mike Godwood, once said this to me. In fact, he said it to me on a number of occasions. When it comes to believing God and trusting God for projects or for faith or for things that we want to see, he used to say this: if God has ordered it, God will pay for it. And I think there is so much truth in that. And if God has ordained you to live somewhere, to do something for him, to pursue something, if you give yourself to God wholeheartedly in every area of your life, including your finances, you will discover this, that if God has got something for you, he is well able to fulfill it and see it to pass. You can never outgive God. Yes, it takes faith to give to God first. It really does. But you can't outgive him. I remember when Michelle and I first went to Africa in 1990. And it was a time when flights were hugely expensive and we had no money to pay for the flights to go on mission to Africa. But we really believed that God was asking us to do it. So we took a step of faith and we gave first to God. And do you know what we did? We put all of our flights on a credit card, thinking, how on earth are we going to pay for that when we get back home? And this is the absolute truth, right? When we got back home from Africa, there was a letter on our doormat with a Building Society cheque in it from somewhere in Lincolnshire. It was actually written by the Building Society, so we have no idea to this day where that money came from or who actually instructed it to be sent to us. But in that envelope was a Building Society cheque for the exact amount of our flights to Africa. What a great story. And I'm sure many of us have got amazing stories that when we give, God gives back. If we treat what we give as something that we will lose, then actually what we lose is the joy of giving in the first place. Don't treat your giving as something that you lose, because you can't lose when you give to God. It's a principle of God's word. In fact, Jesus says these words in the gospel: whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. And so my encouragement to us today is give to God first. Put God first when it comes to your giving, particularly with your finances, because that will always be an Achilles heel to you if you don't. Sow generously with your money, because you will reap. Give lavishly and generously with your finances. You will not lose out, because you cannot outgive God. I want to just kind of finish with a few thoughts just in the last few minutes of my talk today. And I want to say this. Thank you to you as a Hope Church for the way you give. Thank you for the faithful giving week in and week out. Thank you for the way you respond to need. Thank you for your generosity financially. We couldn't do what we do without the generous giving of the people of the church. And I have looked over the last couple of years for the way this church responds to need. You know, last year we had a young couple in the church go through a real crisis time with their little boy, and they needed accommodation in London that was going to cost a lot of money. And we asked the church if they would be prepared to give to help this couple. Do you know, within a few days, we had around £3,000 come in. Wow, thank you. Just a few weeks ago, we put out an email to the church because John and I were going to go off to Kosovo. And we said we want to take some money with us, or we want some money to be sent to them, so that when we get there, we can use that money to help some of the projects, and particularly the poor. Within days, around £700 came in, and it landed in the bank account of the Victory Church in Kosovo while we were there. And we were able to go to a supermarket, and we were able to bless the work of Victory Church as we took food parcels to some of the poorest people that you can imagine. Thank you so much. Because of your generosity and what you give, we're able to support Andy and Helen Taylor and Faith and Emma in Peru as they're living on mission there. We support To Kenya with Love, an incredibly great charity and project as they seek to educate and help children who live in poverty. We support 24/7 prayer. We support, as I've already said, Kosovo. We support youth and children's workers. We support so many ministries that serve the hurting and the poor. And as we come out of this pandemic season, and I don't even like to use the word pandemic now because we're not in it, we're really pushing out of that now, I think things are beginning to open up. Momentum is beginning to happen. New things are in the pipeline already as Hope Church. And so resources will be needed. People will be called upon. We will need mission teams going abroad. There will be mission opportunities here back home to reach out to people in so many areas, to touch the needs of the poor and the broken. Already we're having Ukrainian families starting to connect here at Hope Church. We've just started a youth drop-in centre on a Friday evening, and there's real plans for that to grow. Here are some other things. We have an amazing parent and toddler group in Dis, as well as a great baby group on Wednesdays and Thursdays. We're about to start a Harleston, or hoping to start a Harleston parent and toddler group very soon. We're in schools running clubs and mentoring pupils. We're in primary schools doing activities. We've just started a small group of people in the town of Eye, and that requires us to hire a building every couple of weeks. We've already seen the impact of Food Share on a Friday in our church building as people queue up to receive free food and then enjoy time together. And we're seeing the impact of that. Community Works and the workshop and all that we do with other projects. Do you know what? I could go on, but I want to say all of that costs. But we don't want to stop. In fact, we want our vision and our influence to increase and increase more and more, not just here at home, but throughout other nations. And so in putting God first with our finances, can I encourage you to make a commitment to your local church, this local church, Hope Church? Whatever you give, whether you believe in the principle of 10% of your tithe, whether you believe that actually that's a starting place and you want to give more, can I encourage you to make a regular monthly financial commitment to this church, so that as we move forward, we won't hoard money and save tens of thousands in our church bank accounts. We're never going to do that. We just want to keep sowing it and giving it. And so therefore, we want to encourage you to make that financial commitment. Your giving here makes a difference, and it helps us fulfill all that God has called us to do. So let me finish where I began. For God so loved the world that he gave us his one and only. He gave us everything. Let's be followers of the example of the lavish generosity that God has poured on us. And let us put God first by seeing that everything that we have in regard to our finances is God's. May God bless us today as we give wholeheartedly to the purposes of his kingdom. Thanks for listening.